Audible Inc. presents Game of Thrones and Philosophy. Logic Cuts Deeper Than Swords. Edited by Henry Jacoby. Narrated by Robin Sachs. Foreword by Elio M. Garcia and Linda Antonson. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. Love is the bane of honor, the death of duty. When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. With phrases like these, George R.R. Martin's A Game of Thrones reveals not only a powerful sense of drama, a rich setting, and complex characters, but an understanding that at the heart of his story, of any story, lies conflict. Martin often cites William Faulkner's statement that the only story worth telling is that of the human heart in conflict with itself, and that conflict appears again and again throughout the Song of Ice and Fire series in a way that seemed unprecedented in the epic fantasy genre back in 1996, when the first novel was published. Whether the conflict entailed one lonely, misshapen dwarf's efforts to survive in a society that looks down on him, a friend's struggle to keep an irresponsible king on his throne, or a mother's choice between her family and her duty, Martin presented the moral complexity of people and societies that breathed reality. Though inspired by the likes of J.R.R. Tolkien, father of the epic fantasy, Martin took a different path and opened the door for a wave of new writers who explore characters and settings with an eye toward the darker side of human nature and society. When it was announced that George R.R. Martin's series of fantasy novels, A Song of Ice and Fire, would be adapted by HBO in Game of Thrones, it caused a great deal of excitement and speculation among fans who had been following the saga for a decade. Casting, budgets, shooting locations, special effects, these subjects and more were up for discussion. Yet at the heart of all of these questions was a single overriding concern for most fans. How much fidelity would the show maintain to Martin's novel, not only in terms of plot and characters, but in tone and themes? The first season came and went, and now we know that the producers largely stayed faithful on all levels, weaving together a drama that combined elements of the heroic epic with a moral scale that covered the range from the saintly to the monstrous. Readers often cite the moral complexity of the novels as being a key part of their enjoyment, alluding to characters painted in shades of gray. Previous works of epic fantasy tended to operate with a straightforward moral compass where the antagonist was some variety of evil, dark lord, and the protagonists were defined by their opposition to this evil character based on their obvious moral goodness. In contrast, Martin's series has been written with no Dark Lord to speak of, instead focusing the narrative on the dynastic conflicts that rend the Seven Kingdoms apart beneath the shadow of a looming catastrophe. That catastrophe may be created by nefarious creatures, and it may be the ultimate end point of the narrative, but Martin's choice to keep his eyes on the very human characters with their very human flaws was done well enough to win him legions of fans who appreciated the so-called gritty realism of the narrative. Some of the post-Martin fantasists seemed to pursue grittiness for the sake of grittiness, and that certainly is one approach among many. But it's hard to find in some of these works the human core of the story. In contrast, Martin keeps a sharp focus on his characters, and though they suffer greatly at times, it tastes all the sweeter when they triumph. When they struggle, we struggle with them. Eddard Stark's struggle with questions of honor and honesty, Jon Snow's struggle to choose between vows and love, Tyrion Lannister's effort to win his father's approval because he has so little else. The inner conflict is absolutely integral to the weight of the story, to making A Song of Ice and Fire, and now Game of Thrones, such popular works. These and other questions of ethics, political philosophy, and more are the fulcrum on which the entire story turns. Despite the fact that many of the problems presented in the novel and on the screen are couched in the
Sample complete. Ready to continue?